Welcome back to Master Coaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz. My name is Bob Bertucci, joined by fellow Master Coaches Fran Flory, Mick Haley, and Bill Walton. Our topic for today is everything Doug Beal. What's happening with today's volleyball in the U.S. and around the world? So we're going to cover a lot of different areas. We'll explore the International Hall of Fame, pro leagues for women and men, USAV Awards banquet being sponsored by League One Volleyball, or sometimes known as Love, First Point Foundation, the VNL starting and what these games mean this year, different from other years, and finishing up with Kathy DeBoer's leadership at the AVCA. So I'd like to welcome Doug Beal. Doug, happy to have you here.
Thanks, Bob. Great to be here. Great to see all you guys. Talk among old friends. That's always fun.
Well, we have a lot to cover, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into it, Doug, and I'm going to ask Mick to get us started with the first question.
Thanks, Bob. Hey, Doug, glad to have you on again. The International Volleyball Hall of Fame has been here in the United States for over 30 or 40 years, I believe. They have an inaugural, or not an inaugural, but an inauguration of new people coming up. Can you tell us about this? A lot of people aren't even aware that this goes on in our country. And I was looking at this thinking, wouldn't this be great as a television event for world volleyball to be televised all over the world so people could see people from their country being inducted into the International Volleyball Hall of Fame?
Yeah, you and I are absolutely on the same page with that. I think it would be wonderful. So the Volleyball Hall of Fame has been in the United States for, as you mentioned, quite a long time. And honestly, my involvement with it started with somebody all of you know really well, and hopefully the volleyball population knows, Jim Coleman. And he thought, and I couldn't agree more, that if our sport is really going to grow, if we're going to talk about it in a serious way, we have to recognize and honor the legends of the sport. And we have to get as familiar with them as we possibly can. And halls of fame are challenging organizations and don't exist outside the United States quite the way they do in the United States. So since Holyoke is the birthplace of the sport and uniquely close to Springfield, which is where basketball started, and both of them started within a couple of years of each other, or were invented, I guess, a couple of years within each other. That was the logical place to see if a Hall of Fame had traction and legs. And Jim worked significantly over years to help motivate and start the hall. And it sort of started, I think, Mick, you might remember, with a tournament that Holyoke hosted back in the 1970s that grew in popularity and created some buzz in the community. And Holyoke is a small little city in Western Massachusetts that's gone through some economic challenges. But I'm honestly quite proud of the stability of the hall and the fact that we've worked, I think, quite effectively to identify people from all over the world that ought to be recognized, that ought to be honored. I think another part of the hall is to preserve the history of it in an archival kind of way. As far as I know, there's no other organization that does that in any meaningful way on a world level. The annual induction is probably the highlight event of the hall. It's usually been historically in October. This year it's on the weekend of the 20th and 21st of October in Holyoke. There's been lots of efforts over the years to engage with the International Federation, sometimes more successfully than others. But I think we're actually making some progress there, and there's some acknowledgement by the leaders of the International Federation that this is a really good thing for the sport. And the more that they get involved, and the more they get the 200 plus national federations around the world involved, the more significant this hall can be. And certainly we have lots of models in the United States for wonderful museums and halls that celebrate the sport. And if we really want volleyball to be in that group of sports, I think a worldwide Hall of Fame is a pretty important piece of that puzzle. So,
to keep that going, is anybody funded, or did they have to raise their own money? And how can people contribute if that's true?
Well, certainly we're happy to take any donation we can possibly get. The funding is a challenge. Over the last, I would say 15 or 20 years, there's been a certain amount of consistent funding through USA Volleyball, through the regions and the national office. Honestly, the FIVB has provided some funding. It's not annual, it's not consistent, but it's been there occasionally. A number of national federations have been very generous and helped support it, but most of the money, frankly, comes from the community of Holyoke, and we need to broaden that out significantly to really do what we'd like to do. I think given the limited funding that the hall has been able to generate, the physical space is really pretty impressive. They recently did a redo and went through the archives and created new exhibits. They're not where I think they would like to be, with the trend towards some interactive exhibits that really appeal to younger populations and getting more involved in social media, things like that. But it's a really nice space. The community of Holyoke and their current mayor are much more engaged and supportive than they've been in the past. Yeah, I think it's on a nice upward trajectory, I guess. And if we can finalize a relationship with the International Federation and expose the hall at events around the world, at world championships or Olympic qualification events, I think it'll be a facility that we have, we can be really proud of. And I love the leadership right now locally. George Mulry is the executive director. Steve Bishop, who's the lead staff person at the Florida region of USA Volleyball, is the chair of the board. The board has expanded. So I'm pretty excited about the direction of it. They've just gone through a new rebranding, changing the website. So
when is this year's induction?
Yeah, 2021 October.
Okay, coming up. So can people still get tickets? Absolutely.
Go to the website. I think the website right now is volleyhall.org. So VOLLEYHALL, volleyhall.org. The class is on there for 23. It's a great class with some people I think lots of volleyball fans will recognize. Phil Dalhouser is being inducted from the U.S. In the beach category. So yeah, absolutely. The induction is the main event. It's a sort of a gala dinner on Saturday night. Just as an aside, it's one of my favorite events of the year because the voting is principally by prior inductees, and the emotion of many of the inductees to realize the unique group that they're joining tends to be pretty overwhelming. And there's lots of good emotion that is shared by the inductees. It's a really special event. And
Okay.
there you go.
We're going to go to pro sports now. Fran, why don't you jump in on this?
Yeah, let's take you out of the history of the sport into maybe the future, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see where we're
Okay.
going here. So two new women's professional leagues with Pro Volleyball Federation starting in February 24, League One in 2025. Where is this? And we have Athletes Unlimited, who's in their third year, right? So who's moved from the spring to the fall. Where is this heading? What are your opinions of these, all three of these women's pro leagues getting their start here?
We shouldn't forget the Puerto Rican league also.
Where are they heading? Where's my crystal ball when I really need it? So I have a number of thoughts. First, I think it's fantastic for the sport in the United States that there are a number of entities that want to try to start professional women's volleyball, and maybe professional men's too. I think the path of least resistance, at least to start, seems to be women, and for obvious reasons, the size of the sport and the popularity of women's volleyball in this country. So I love that part of it. I don't know that starting multiple leagues is the best model. I'm not sure there is a best model. And so, you're just getting lots of my opinion here. But another good thing that seems to me to be important is that all three of the groups that you mentioned, Fran, seem to be pretty well funded, that there's some credible money there, and that they're willing to invest that money or invest it in the sport. I think that's different than most of the past initiatives over the years that all of us probably on this panel here can remember. There wasn't a lot of serious money, so that's significant. It's expensive. I don't think there's any way around it. To carve out the piece that professional volleyball needs to carve out is not going to happen overnight. So another really good thing, I think, is that it seems to me, for any number of reasons, maybe great reasons, the media broadly is sort of discovering our sport, and not just on the women's side and not just indoor, but broadly. NCAA women's beach volleyball has really grown dramatically, and it's a really popular part of the NCAA championship in a very short period of time. Men's college is growing, not like we'd like, but better than any other men's college sport that we know of. The junior world just doesn't show any signs of slowing down, and everybody wants to create junior events and find a convention center, and teams show up. So there's just huge growth in our sport, which is fantastic, and that's great for pro leagues. You've got really different models, and I don't know that I would call the Athletes Unlimited sort of a pro league. I'd call it maybe an extended tournament, something like that. But it's shown some continuity. There's significant dollars behind it, and it's a different model. My opinion is that in this country, for professional volleyball to, be meaningful, credible, sustainable, we have a model that works in that world, to meet those conditions, I think. And that's the sort of the franchise model, different cities supporting a team or franchise, a league season that leads to playoffs, and kind of focusing on individual athletes within that team culture, I think. So I like that. I think some of the announcements we've seen from the pro federation model really excite me. Credible coaches that have got a long history of success in our sport, individuals in leadership that come from the sport. But maybe the most important thing, the ownership groups, or at least the identified ownership groups, seem to have money. And, it's just, I know it's sort of a simple answer, but I don't see how you start a sustainable pro league without deep pockets, and hopefully they're willing to spend money and understand that it's not going to be an overnight success, or certainly there hasn't ever been an overnight success. Let's put it that way. Maybe they'll be unique. So I'm pretty excited. I like the cities they're going to. It's sort of a mix between major markets and maybe somewhat smaller markets. I like that model. I like the model of that league. I'm not as optimistic about the Love model, the Volleyball One. I'm not sure how you transition from a base of junior club activity, which is everywhere in this country essentially, to this sustainable professional model. So let me stop there and let somebody else jump in for a minute.
Oh, that's okay. And Puerto Rico has done this for a while. Their league, we've all had kids go and play, and they've been sustainable, right? So it can be done. We know that, and money is the factor, right? So I guess my next question would be, the men's league that they have, the VLA, that's been operating since 2019. They also have added a women's division to that. So presumably there's now even more opportunity for these women to go play, and again, an opportunity for men to play. So speak a little bit about the opportunity for men to play, and then maybe add, another league for women, maybe another challenge.
Yeah, bunch of questions there.
For sure. I'm leaving it open for you to go where you want.
Yeah. I think the Puerto Rican League is an anomaly, frankly. I think it's been great over the years for a certain population of U.S. women coming out of college, and for a while men too. So they had a men's league that was similar. And the sport is really popular in Puerto Rico, as I think all of us know. And there's lots of young kids who come to the United States for college from Puerto Rico, and it's been pretty impactful over the years, I think, on both men's and women's side. But you're talking about a really small population there without any other significant professional competition. The money was marginal. The turnover of clubs was significant. So I don't see that in the same vein as what Love is proposing, Love B, and what the Federation is proposing. I think, frankly, I think if the Pro Federation is successful in this country, that'll probably hurt the Puerto Rican League. So the opportunities are terrific, I think. And I've said this many times, so it shouldn't be a shock to anybody. The number of players is easy in this country. We have so many that filling up, 2 or 3 women's leagues can be done, in my view. And not very many people, I think, are going to know initially, at least, about whether they're the best players or the second tier or whatever. We have such a large population, certainly on the women's side, but even on the men's side, of talented players who want to play, who would make probably more sacrifices than we'd like to see them make, maybe. So that's the easy part. So let me separate a little bit out the VLA, and I don't think you should forget what is it, the NVA, National Volleyball Association. So there's these two groups of men's leagues that are also ongoing. But I think there's a big difference between the women's initiatives and the men's right now that's ongoing in our country. The women's initiatives seem to be connected to people with serious money. I don't know another way to phrase it, but they have money and they're willing to spend it. On the men's side, it's being mostly dependent on the commitment of the athletes. And so I don't think very many of our top men's players are thinking about these as long-term options to be a professional male volleyball player in the United States right now. And I'm really confused why VLA is interested in starting women when we've got these other three leagues going on. And I don't know the inside of that decision making, but gosh, we've got these two pretty serious initiatives going on. We've got Athletes Unlimited. Their league really grew out of what USA Volleyball did for a couple of years with the PVL, which was partly to try to start professional volleyball, but actually it was more to try to support a viable division at the adult national championships, which right now it has gone down to very little.
Right.
And so that event is just sort of, don't take this term, in a negative way, sort of a glorified recreational tournament for age group athletes. And it meets a wonderful need. We never thought there were this many 60, 70, and even older individuals that wanted to, knock themselves out for 5 or 6 days to play, more volleyball than they play all year long. So I love the fact that it's happening. I love the fact that VLA is out there and that it's growing. And I think the same thing, I went on the NVA's page earlier this morning, and gosh, I think they've got 16 teams that they promote. So there's no lack of players that want to play professionally, and are, again, on the men's side, way more are willing to make lots of sacrifices to do that. I just am hoping like crazy that the decisions that the Federation League and League One make allow them to be sustainable and grow. And I think, it's all about carving out this piece in this very competitive, congested sports entertainment marketplace in the United States. And there's no place in the world that has this kind of congested marketplace. And so it just becomes really challenging. And then we have a huge geographic issue going on, so it's challenging to travel, and it's expensive to rent big facilities, and et cetera. And I think most of us would love to see volleyball in a 15 or 20,000 seat arena and get the kind of vibes that the NCAA women's finals get for the last 8 or 10 years, setting records, and whether that's the best environment to see volleyball on a kind of a pro weekly basis or not, I think is up for debate.
Figure that out. All right, Billy.
Yeah. Doug, keep your crystal ball out.
Yeah, it's right over here.
Most professional leagues in the world, including Puerto Rico, are kind of sponsored or run or highly coordinated through their national federation, their NGB. In this country, LOVB formed, and they started buying up junior clubs with the hope of eventually having a women's pro league. One of their founders, Hirschman, is a member of Bain or was a partner at Bain Capital. And so when I did research, when they bought their first club, I started researching who Hirschman was and Bain Capital, and I came across an article, and I never knew this, but Bain Capital bought cheerleading for $2.5 billion. And what they bought allowed them to eventually gain control of all of cheerleading through the National Cheerleading Organization, through the kind of the governing body. And now Hirschman's put himself on the USAV founders board. Well, he didn't put himself, but he's on the founders board. Danielle Scott's on the founders board of directors, and they're both members of LOVB. Is LOVB kind of attempting to do with volleyball what they did with cheerleading and try and have some control over it from the NGB side to garner their reputation and enter the pro league area?
Yeah, I don't think my crystal ball goes that far, Bill. Yeah. So first, a couple of terms, I think. So cheerleading does have a national federation, but it's not an NGB under the Olympic banner. So they operate under different criteria. And I'm sure USA Volleyball would be happy to take $2.5 billion anytime they'd like to make that offer. And I don't know, maybe they'd give up NGB status to do it. Yeah, and I think you're referring actually to the foundation, USA Volleyball's foundation.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, could there be a conflict of interest? Sure. There are conflicts of interest, honestly, for almost everybody that's on the USA Volleyball's board of directors. If you come from a constituent population, you're almost automatically conflicted with a certain number of discussion points that would happen at the board. Is it a huge problem? I don't think so right now. And I'm not on the board, but obviously I was involved significantly for 20 plus years. The bigger problem to me about the foundation is I'm not sure that they're doing very much, which is, I think, unfortunate. I'm not sure they're aggressively out there trying to generate more money to support the growth of the sport broadly at whatever level USA Volleyball can influence it. And that's gone on for a little while. When I look at the makeup of the board, I'm quite impressed, frankly, with the background of many of the people on that board. My question is, I'd love there to be devoted staff to work under that board to really see, as the sport seems to be exploding in so many different areas, why can't volleyball, why can't USA Volleyball particularly generate some significant donations? Because principally it's the only organization that exists, which it should be as an NGB, that goes from the grassroots up to the Olympic level. And of course they're unique in that Olympic level. So they're the only organization that can select the Olympic team and deal with the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee. So it just seems to me like that ought to be an important issue. And if Hirschman or anybody else on the board, has connections to significant potential donors, I'm fine with that. So the only other thoughts I have about that, Bill, honestly, is that USA Volleyball has to be really concerned about maintaining their 501c3 status. Being a nonprofit, they have to be careful about, connections to any for-profit entity. But there, there are ways to do all those things. You know, again, I think having a Peter Hirschman on the board is great, frankly. I think maybe a bigger issue for USA Volleyball is that, his organization, Love, and other entities are buying up clubs around the country. And frankly, the club base is the foundation of what USA Volleyball really is. Yes, they're the national governing body, and they can select the Olympic team, and they participate in the Olympics and Pan American Games, and et cetera, et cetera. But the membership base and the foundation of the sport that allows the sport to grow is really more concentrated at the club level. I wish it was maybe not quite that way, because I think we sometimes minimize the high school impact and where sport is broadly introduced to kids. But anyway, that's the reality of the world we're in right now. And it's not just volleyball. Of course, you guys all know that. And I think most of your listeners know the same thing. Club sports is really just a huge industry in this country, and frankly, largely unregulated. No matter where your politics feels, yeah, it's a largely unregulated field.
So when you brought up the club thing and you brought that USAV, it counts on their junior base, is JVA, we weren't going to talk about it, but since you brought it up, is JVA a competitor to USAV? And is three-step going to end up running more tournaments than USAV?
Yeah, this won't make you happy in the answer, but yes and no. The good news is that this is a huge space, and there doesn't seem to be an ending of the appetite for the kids themselves, the participants, their parents, club coaches, whatever, to compete. They want to play, and that's really the foundation of getting kids exposed to the game. Teach them what you can teach them, but let them go out and compete and know what's fun, learn what's fun about the game at whatever age they're at. So yeah, our three-step, that organization and JVA, yeah, and AAU, they're all competitors in a certain sense. The good news for USA Volleyball is the membership keeps going up. Maybe the challenging news is that membership outside of the region may not be playing in USAV's national championship events at the same level that they were, I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. It's a fractured world, but not in a terrible way, I think, Bill. I think it's great that volleyball is so popular, is so embedded in the culture of youth sports, that there's this opportunity there for a lot of organizations to see that and want to get engaged. And at some level, I think, whether we like it or not, competition makes us all better, makes us do something better, think in a better way, think in a more creative way, make better events, better perks for the referees, better perks for the cities that want to host events. And so maybe you start to get convention centers aggressively bidding for junior volleyball tournaments and more opportunities for kids to play. And so it's not all good, it's not all bad. It's just sort of how you manage it. And I'm not leaving you with a great model here.
That's a great lead in, though, to what I was going to ask here. But you were executive director of USAV for a number of years. You actively pursued trying to get the educational arm going, the foundation going, to provide opportunities for boys, some kind of control in the tournament oversight of junior clubs. All of those things you were managing, and yet the JVA outgrowth is seemingly to provide more education. 3-step is to provide more tournament opportunities. And now we have First Point, which you and I are both members of the First Point Foundation, started by John Spraw, the national team men's coach and the UCLA national championship head men's coach, and Wade Gerard out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Tell us a little bit about First Point, how they got started, and what they're up to right now.
Yeah, I think First Point, as you mentioned, well, for those that aren't familiar with it, it started specifically as a foundation to raise money to start new men's collegiate programs. I think we all know that if you add Division 1, 2, and 3 together on the men's side, you might get to a little under 200 collegiate programs. And Fran, what's the number if I add Division 1, 2, and 3 together on the women's side? How many colleges are there? That's the number we'd have, I think. Yeah, 900. So we're at this enormous disparity in terms of collegiate sponsorship of volleyball. And I guess from some point when I started at USAV, you have to think we sort of have two ways, I think, to really grow the sport in a dramatic way in this country and raise the profile of the sport. I think one is, as we've already talked about earlier in the show, credible, sustainable professional leagues. Sustainable is important. Credible is important too, and meaningful. The other way, in my view, is to broaden the number of particularly Division I men's collegiate programs, fully funded. And when I say fully funded, we're talking about the maximum number of allowable scholarships right now. So for men, it's 4.5. And I think in some respects, First Point has done a remarkable job. And that's why I'm interested in being connected with them. And I know, Mick, that's important to you and everybody else on this call. I get that.
But to interrupt you just a second,
Sure.
It was interesting. You and I both attended the Hall of Fame USAV banquet last week in Dallas. And Scott Fortune, USA national team player for a number of years, star player at Stanford for a number of years, spoke about the Stanford men's players standing up for men's volleyball at Stanford when Stanford tried to drop the sport, and took very much credit for the $15 million bankrolling of that program so that we didn't lose Stanford as a major sport. But I thought he was remiss in not mentioning the role of First Point, because First Point jumped in and organized that to start with, and gave some kind of organization to Stanford's group of getting together, and made a sizable commitment in dollars that they didn't have at the time, that they're still responsible for. How did you read that situation and the importance of First Point in that situation?
Yeah, I don't want to be terribly critical of Scott. I think, he's up there for 3 or 4 minutes, but yeah, I think First Point for sure played a role there. Yeah. The Stanford situation was really unique in a couple of ways, good and bad. It was terrible that they thought they had to eliminate 11 sports at one point. And I think that leads you into a broad discussion of the future of NCAA sports. And I think that's probably for another program here. But there's lots of anxiety among many of us, I'm sure all of you too, about where we're headed with NCAA sports. So the fact that Stanford felt like they needed to eliminate 11 of them was terrible. Mostly Olympic sports, by the way. And then the fact that they reversed that decision because of efforts by First Point and the alumni base was great. And it shows you the power, I think, of the alumni base, and particularly in men's volleyball at Stanford. I think they got some absurdly high number of alumni to make a commitment of a donation. Something like 97% of every kid who ever played on the men's volleyball team. It was
Wow.
just off the charts, remarkable. So that shows you, I think, the power of alumni-based university programs, what they can do, and that's terrific. First Point is the only organization that's ever existed that has focused directly on boys and men's volleyball. And certainly, you know, when I was at USA Volleyball, it was a no-brainer for me to provide some seed funding for First Point. And the growth has been terrific, in my view, terrific and significant. You know, there are times when I'd love them to be even more focused on just collegiate, but the success they've had with helping to get high schools state championships at, I'm guessing now, maybe 6 or 7 states that didn't exist a few years ago is really impactful. The initiative at the junior college level, NAIA schools, even clubs. So across the board, the opportunities that have been made available and grown because of the initiatives of the First Point Foundation is really impactful for the sport. And as I said, if you could imagine, I don't know, pick 5 or 6 major Division I schools starting new men's volleyball programs, collegiate men's volleyball programs, 1 or 2 in the Big Ten, 1 or 2 in the SEC, or 1 or 2 in the Pac-12, you know, really well-known schools. That just pushes the sport up to another level of media attention and just profile across the country. So I think that's hugely significant. And I applaud John. There are days I can't imagine how he manages coaching these 2 programs to begin with, and then his work at First Point. And Wade Gerard, you mentioned, who's the executive director for it, and a whole bunch of others. So they've raised millions of dollars. We need even more millions of dollars to really, I think, make that kind of jump. But those are the 2 things, to me, that really drive the profile of sport: sustainable pro leagues in this country, and some certain level of growth for men's collegiate programs at recognizable schools that are in the public eye all the time. So, you know, Nebraska would be right at the top of my list. If they can sell 93,000 tickets for a regular season match in their football stadium, good grief, they can start a men's volleyball program, and then they'd be the 5th Big Ten school out there. So
what's the over/under on rain?
I don't know, something I don't want to put a lot of money on. But you know, I mean, those kind of things are fantastic. You know, they're not happening in any other sport that I can think of, and that kind of media event is just terrific for the sport, and it's going to create a lot of buzz. And maybe some other schools will start to do the same thing and see, you know, the competition within the Big Ten on the women's side is enormous for advancing the sport. And now the SEC seems to be stepping up, and certainly the Pac-12 has been there before. You know that as well as anybody, Mick, I think. But that's what drives sports competition in our country. Everybody in the SEC wants to knock Nick Saban off the perch, and same thing in women's volleyball in the Big Ten, I think. So that's sort of endemic to the culture of sports in our country, and I think volleyball has to be right in there if we really want to get to the higher and higher profile. I think we got to do those kind of things. So I think it's great that John Cook has pushed that and that the school supports it.
Bob, you still awake?
Yeah, Doug, I'm going to go a little international for a few minutes.
Oh boy,
I've waited
can't wait.
patiently here.
Yeah.
Well, Yeah, the Volleyball Nations League, VNL, started just recently. Can you explain to our listeners a little bit about this league and what it was in the past and how it's different or how it's changed for this year, especially with the Olympic qualifications?
Yeah. So first, spoiler alert, I guess our women's team started with a 5-set win over Serbia that just got over, I don't know, an hour or two ago.
Oh, really
So
good.
that's really nice start for our women. Yeah.
Really good.
And
That's a big one.
three rookie outside hitters played.
Yeah. So really terrific. So the VNL is sort of a rebranding effort by the International Federation to bring the men's and women's events that they had created, I don't know, 35 years ago, something like that. That was the World League on the men's side and the
Grand Prix.
Grand Prix on the women's side. Yeah, so it's essentially the same event. But when the FIVB partnered with CVC Capital and created Volleyball World, all of their assets went into this new deal, and so it's been rebranded and is really I think a much improved event in many respects. The TV is consistent, the hosting conditions are consistent, et cetera. And directly to what you asked about, Bob, the VNL now is a significant part of the qualification process on the indoor side for Paris in 24. So there will be 3 qualifying tournaments in September and October this year. The women's events are late September. The men's events are early October. And 2 teams from each of those 3 events, so 6 teams men, 6 teams women will qualify. The balance of 5 places will come from the world ranking, which is largely influenced by the VNL. And I think I'm accurate in saying this. It's the world ranking that exists at the end of the round robin part or the preliminary part of the 24 VNL. So they play a preliminary, I think it's three weeks of preliminary pool play and then a finals. So in 24, those teams that have not already qualified, hopefully the US will, but perhaps not, the VNL will be really important to get your ranking up as high as possible. So it will be the 5 highest ranked non-qualified teams from that ranking at that point in time. And it's kind of a rolling ranking and way more complicated to explain than we have here, because I'm not sure I understand it completely.
Well, the point is that every match is going to count in terms of
every match, really important.
The women just won is a huge win, and
yes,
every one of them is going to count. Where before, you were playing the Grand Prix or you were playing the World League, and yeah, it was nice to win the matches. Maybe it would bring some more money back to the organization, but
correct.
You might have qualified through a whole nother system at that point.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Not just every match, every set's important.
Yeah, I think that's essentially right. And the challenging part for both Karch on the women's side and John on the men's side is to balance how important those matches are with trying to develop younger players who can, I don't know, develop a deeper roster for any number of reasons. Players retire, players get injured, and it's a challenging world that they're trying to navigate. So, yes, the VNL is really significant, and I think that's great, honestly, for the sport right now.
Doug, did you watch this morning?
No, I didn't get a chance, but I will. I'll pick it up.
Can you tell our listeners how they can watch?
Yeah, to watch it live, the only way is to get a subscription through Volleyball World. So it's a pay-per-view process in this country. In a few other places, it's not, but that's the only way in the U.S. to watch the VNL. It's not a, I forget the price. It's not terrible. I don't know. Fran, you look like you know the price or something. $40, $50, something like that.
I think it was like 39 or 49, but I'm not,
Yeah.
don't quote me. I'm not 100% sure. I did look at it, but I can't remember
Right.
what the subscription was, but
With a 7-day free trial.
There you go. Yeah.
there you go.
Actually, you know, a lot of things that the guy who's running the Volleyball World company is really, I think, in a very challenging position, but doing a really, really good job. And his name is Finn Taylor. He comes from the background of producing, you know, major productions, Cirque du Soleil and stuff like that. So the television coverage is much, much better than it was back in the old days of the World League, and when each country kind of did their own TV. So it was really good if you were in Poland, and not so good if you were in some other country, maybe in the United States even. So I think that part is good and a plus.
So you're changing into somebody that has a huge impact from that perspective. Can you talk a little bit about Kathy DeBoer and her impact? And only a two-part question this time for you. And then follow that up with Jamie Gordon and the challenges he might face as he takes over this organization.
Yeah. Tough shoes to fill. Kathy has been, I think, one of the most remarkable leaders in our sport over the last 20 plus years, and a wonderful background, player, coach, etc., administrator, collegiately, and just from my perspective, made the AVCA enormously relevant. Was out in front of lots of issues, probably beach more than anything, but I think men's growth also, and just maybe more broadly, Fran, honestly, to make the profession of coaching a significantly higher profile profession, something that lots of people want to go into, that didn't exist before that at the level that it is right now. I just give Kathy tons of credit for that. I can remember when I started, it just never even occurred to me that I could make a living coaching volleyball. Even when I was coaching the national team, it was just not that. So hopefully my dog won't get crazy carried away here. I think Kathy just did a remarkable job with the ABCA, and I think Jamie, I think she's stepping away at a pretty interesting time, and because the world is changing, and the world of collegiate sports is changing, and that's obviously a big part of who the ABCA is. I think all of Jamie's issues start with how do you continue to navigate growing the coaching world in the environment where we're not sure what it's going to look like next season. The financial challenges are huge, and I think his background is wonderful, that he was interested enough to step away from an athletic directorship, and certainly has a wonderful volleyball background too. And I don't know him at all, but I've talked to Kathy a number of times, and her I don't know, endorsement is pretty significant for me. So I love his background. I think the other big part of his responsibilities are going to be how do I continue to grow the convention, that singular event, to make it increasingly relevant, significant, financially rewarding for the organization, because such a big part of that organization financially depends on that event. And its importance to the volleyball community is huge, and hopefully continues, and maybe it even grows internationally, because we have a unique ecosystem of sports in this country that the rest of the world really admires, but they're not sure how to connect all the time. And so I think that's a challenge for him. Paying attention to beach and paying attention to the men and trying to balance that is a big part of it. But I think just, where's college sports going? Are we going to just keep separating the haves from the have-nots? Because it sure looks like that's a big issue right now, and that's not great. We have this wonderful situation in universities broadly. Sports is a huge part of it. If sports gets diminished, we've taken away something really fundamental to what makes the university system so attractive in this country, but all over the world. And I think most of us want to believe that we favor broad-based participation, and we'd like to see sports continue in some vein there, being really high profile, but allowing for participation in a whole lot of sports, not just 4 or 5. So
Right.
I think that's a big challenge for Jamie, and hopefully we can all support him, and the organization can still grow. But boy, to come back to Kathy, just remarkable accomplishments, and I think we all maybe start to get a little emotional when we think about her retirement. We're losing, at least from this very significant position, somebody who's not been afraid to take positions, and sometimes quite controversial, and be a leader, and drive issues to the betterment of all of us who love this sport and have played a significant role.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Here.
Thanks, Doug. And hey, listen, Doug, thank you very much for again taking the time out to answer all these questions we had, cover all these areas that we knew that you would be the person to go to and kind of get some insights on. And we are very proud of Kathy and all the work she's done, and we're equally as proud of you and what you've done for the sport over the years.
Thank you
Your
very
dog
much.
agrees. Your dog agrees.
2 of them. One's very quiet right now. Hey, thank you guys very much. It's really been fun for me to chat. I don't get tired of talking to you guys, and I appreciate what you do to give a voice to a whole range of different topics and ideas. It's an exciting time in our sport, and these conversations are a part of that. So congratulations. Fun to be with you.
Thanks,
Thank
Doug.
you, Doug. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, and of course, next week our guest is going to be Jamie Gordon himself. So we'll have a chance to really kind of jump into finding out how he feels about the challenges that he's facing, taking over the reins of the AVCA. All right. Any other thoughts that you guys would like to address? We only have a couple of minutes left before we kind of sign off. We do have a couple of quick announcements. Doug, if you have to go, we appreciate you being on.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks again.
Okay. We have made it to the podcast arena, where our first show last week's show was going to be our first show up. This week's show will be our second on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google. And all you have to do is just type in Volleyball Master Coaches, and you'll see the little Baden Volleyball pop up, and you'll know it's us. Anything else you guys would like to add about today's interview with Doug? I thought he covered quite a few topics for us and did a great job.
No, he was pretty good about making sure that he didn't leave us with anything controversial. So we can't have any rants today. But that's a full show, so I think we probably ought to leave it at that, and then attack some of the things he pointed out would be good for a complete show down the road.
Oh yeah, he gave us 4 or 5 topics for future shows for sure.
There's no question. What an immense area he covered today.
All right, well, we'll see everybody back, same time, same station, next Wednesday. And for Jamie Gordon, the new executive director of the AVCA.
And congratulations to our U.S. women on a victory this morning in their first VNL, 3-2 over Serbia.
Absolutely, big
That's a big
deal.
win.